It's been decades since the last manned moon landing, Apollo 17, which happened in December 1972. Isn't it time we thought about going back to our dusty satellite, and maybe even staying there? NASA has made a promise on this subject. They're preparing to send astronauts on the moon again, perhaps by 2025. This will all happen through a program called Artemis. It's also going to include the first woman ever to experience the lunar surface. Now you might ask, why haven't we done this already? One former NASA administrator said something interesting on the subject. It's not because of scientific or technological issues. Problem was that the potential projects took too long and were just too costly. You see, space travel, especially when it involves humans, isn't easy on the pockets. It's true that, in recent years, NASA had budgets of billions of dollars. Sure sounds like enough money, right? Well, not when you check out their to-do list. That's because they have to consider everything. From telescopes and giant rocket projects to missions also targeting the Sun, Jupiter, Mars, and beyond. When you look at it this way, NASA needs to be very good at budgeting to achieve all those goals. It's not just because of finances, though. The moon itself is quite problematic. It poses real dangers that cannot be taken lightly. For starters, its surface is filled with craters and boulders that aren't easy to land on. Then, there is the moon dust, or regolith, if you'd like to call it by its scientific name. It was created over many years by meteorite impacts. It's extremely harsh and sticks to everything. It can potentially damage spacesuits, vehicles, and systems quite quickly. Also, dealing with the lunar habitat isn't a walk in the park either. The moon has no protective atmosphere. What this means is that for 14 days at a time, the lunar surface is faced with harsh rays from the sun. That period is followed by another 2 weeks of total darkness. All these changes create extreme temperatures, which us humans are not really accustomed to. There are solutions, don't worry. NASA is working on dust and sun-resistant spacesuits and vehicles. They're even developing a system that might supply electricity during those lunar nights. What's even more interesting about this system is it could come in handy on Mars too, once we get there. NASA also needs to draw in really smart people for its projects. Think about it. The average age of the people working for the mission control for Apollo 13 was just 26 years old. And these people had already been part of numerous missions by that time, which means they'd had considerable experience from a very young age. But here's where other individuals can help too. In recent years, it wasn't just NASA who's been working tirelessly to revolutionize space travel. There are many successful people out there with enough resources to join in on these efforts. Some are developing new types of rockets that can land on the moon too. In total, NASA landed 12 people on our satellite. It's definitely one of the most awesome moments in its history, if not the best. And those astronauts did amazing things up there. They brought back rocks, took snapshots, did science experiments, and even left flags behind. These were all important moments of the Apollo missions, but they weren't meant to create a safe place for humans on the moon. Scientists have had this idea of a lunar space station for a long time now. It's only logical. After all, it's just a 3-day trip from Earth. It means we can, technically, afford to make little mistakes here and there, without messing up the whole project. Plus, we'd learn so much before venturing even further into space. A moon base could provide fuel for deep space missions. We could also build telescopes up there, and launch them way easier in space. It could also help us in another important project. Figure out how to make Mars habitable too. Not to mention, a lunar space station would help us learn more about the moon's origin. Who knows, it could even bring in some money because of all that fun, exciting lunar tourism. Either way, the Apollo moon program took a lot of work. For starters, let's look at the sheer number of people involved. Around 400,000, from every corner of the states. Not everything was picture perfect, tough. There were two main unfortunate events. Firstly, a fire mishap at the launch pad of Apollo 1. Secondly, an oxygen tank decided to throw a tantrum on Apollo 13, causing severe issues mid-mission. An important part of the project was Saturn V. It is to this day the most powerful rocket flown successfully, being 36 stories high. Still finding it hard to picture? This rocket stood twice as tall as Niagara Falls. Thanks to Saturn V, NASA successfully completed 13 missions. This included chauffeuring 24 astronauts towards the moon, with half of them even having a little walk on its surface. The existing rockets and space shuttles can't go beyond low Earth orbit. In simpler terms, they can't reach the moon with all the gadgets astronauts need to thrive. Current space vehicles are just not capable of carrying that load, at least not since the Apollo missions happened. Regardless, we did make a lot of progress on Earth and are ready to send astronauts to our satellite pretty soon. Here's where the Artemis project comes in. It's a program overseen by NASA. And to make sure it all goes well, NASA previously launched Orion, a spacecraft with no crew on board to orbit the moon and return to Earth. Think of it as an automated test drive. Before we actually send people out there again, we need to make sure all the devices work properly. One day, Orion will be the vehicle that will take astronauts to the moon again. It features a launch abort system to keep astronauts safe in case something bad happens during launch. It also has a service module, which is the powerhouse that fuels and propels Orion and keeps astronauts alive with water, oxygen, power, and temperature control. All these future projects make one wonder, what will life on the moon be like anyway? We can only use our imagination for now. Some say we'll be living in homes straight out of a fairy tale, something like a cozy hobbit hole. Living underground on the moon might be a must. That's due to the scorching temperatures and the lack of oxygen. If you add meteorite threats and the non-stop radiation, it's no wonder we can't just walk on its surface. What about transportation? Big and small companies alike are trying to create the ideal moon ride. If current estimations are current, one type of moon taxi will take off as soon as 2024. Unlike our current rockets, these space taxis won't have to deal with the harsh conditions of re-entering Earth's atmosphere. It will be easier for them to make multiple round trips. To support our lunar living, we'll need to have a special area for space taxis to safely take off and land. Think of it as a landing pad on a firm, flat stretch of moon surface, protected by walls to shield against moon dust. Moving around on the moon's surface will be made easier too. The next generation vehicles we're talking about will have their own controlled environment, which means you won't need a spacesuit while inside. Should feel like stepping out of your space ride for a bit. Then of course, you'll need to put on your spacesuit. All right. So we've got our homes and our rides sorted. But what about fuel? That's where the moon throws us a lifeline. The moon's lighter gravity means we don't need as much power to escape its pull. Plus, the moon has ice, and that's super handy. We might be able to convert this ice into rocket fuel. We'll need dedicated space gadgets to help gather this ice. One such tool is called Trident. It's like a drill, perfect for digging into the icy moon surface. Additional robotic helpers would then turn this ice into fuel and deliver it to a space gas station. If this works, rockets on their way to Mars could stop by for a quick fuel top-up before continuing their journey.
What if we built a huge tower on the moon? A tower that could provide future missions with light, power, and guidance technologies that could help astronauts explore our natural satellite. It's not something from a sci-fi book. It's a novel idea from Honeybee Robotics, one of the brightest space technology companies. The lunar utility navigation with advanced remote sensing and autonomous beaming for energy redistribution, or simply Lunar Saber, is a 328 tall pole. It's capable of holding 1 ton of equipment on top of it. But how could we build such a giant construction? No rocket would be able to hold and land such a giant pole on the moon. And building such a tower on the lunar surface without already existing infrastructure would be next to impossible. So, Honeybee might use the deployable interlocking actuated bands for linear operations Diablo system. It uses a rolled piece of metal and bends it into a deployable cylindrical structure that can support really heavy payloads. It would be easier to build it on the moon because gravity there is only 16% of that on Earth. The structure could serve as the base for Lunar Saber. Power is crucial on the moon, so putting solar panels along the sides of the pole would be super useful. The company is now discussing 2 types of solar panels. The first one is like a yo-yo extended from the top payload holder of the tower. It would envelop the metallic structure and allow access to the sun at all angles. The second option might involve the top part of the tower. It could deploy its booms to hold traditional solar panels and then track the sun. Power supply wouldn't be the only Lunar Saber's task. It would also be able to beam power to other devices, track other devices, and provide communication, light, and energy. Let's talk about these functions in more detail. If one mast of the pole was bathing in sunlight while another was lingering in shadow, the one with excess power would be able to beam power to the one lacking it. Plus, similar power beaming could happen between Lunar Saber and rovers and astronauts in spacesuits. To beam all that power effectively, though, the tower would need to know the precise location of those objects. That's where the second technology would come in. Lunar Saber could use a set of sensors to find and track other objects. Basically, anything in a direct line of sight could be tracked and powered by the tower itself. Lunar Saber could also act as a lunar cell phone tower. It would allow wireless communication in its network. And finally, it would be super helpful for astronauts to actually see where they would be going. Rovers wouldn't need to wait out the 2-week lunar darkness. Floodlights at the top of the tower could provide enough visible light for astronauts and rovers, which would allow them to effectively perform their activities at all times. But guess what? The tower could become even more useful. We could combine several towers in a mesh. It would allow astronauts to communicate more effectively. Plus, power could be beamed even from the other side of the moon. It would enable 2 main applications that have been a thorn in lunar exploration's side so far: constant communication with Earth and constant supply of solar power. The thing is, explorations on the other side of the moon are quite tricky, which limits the area of scientific research to the side directly facing Earth. But a strategically placed mesh of Lunar Sabers could allow communication back to Earth, and we would be able to explore the dark side of the moon. Since at least half of our natural satellite is always lit up, if we placed Lunar Sabers correctly around the surface of the moon, there would always be at least one bathing in sunlight. That one sunlit tower would then wirelessly transmit power to others in its line of sight. This process would keep going until power was beamed to the main astronauts' base, supplying them with power even in the cold lunar darkness. Unfortunately, at the moment, such technologies look unrealistic. We're not close to having wireless energy transmission over long distances. Even on Earth, we still need to use batteries and wires. It might be easier to launch many satellites into orbit around the moon than to create a network of giant communication towers.
Count how many times the word moon is said in this video. Enjoy! There might be moons out there in space. These are moons orbiting other moons. Online, these fascinating hypothetical space objects have already been nicknamed submoons, grand moons, moonitos, moonates, and even moons. They might not exist in our solar system or any other. But some astronomers claim that the concept of a moon bringing up its own baby moon is quite plausible. The thing is, in all planetary systems we know about, natural satellites occur in a strict order. Planets orbit stars, and moons move around planets. But then, Why can't sub-moons orbit moons? Take Earth's natural satellite. It's so massive that some astronomers even want to call it a planet in its own right. Then why shouldn't this planet-sized moon have its own satellite? In a new paper, a couple of researchers looked for a mathematical answer to the puzzle of moons. Using special equations created to show the tidal effects of planets on their moons, the scientists determined that submoons could exist if the host moon was massive enough and the submoon was small enough. Plus, there should be a wide orbital gap between these two moons and the host planet. This way, a 6-mile wide submoon could only survive moving around a 600-mile wide moon on a wide separation orbit. If these parameters are not met, the tidal forces of the host planet would be too powerful and would smash the moon and the moon together. Or these forces would be too weak to keep the submoon, and it would get jettisoned into space. Based on these conditions, there are quite a few natural satellites in our solar system that could hypothetically host baby moons of their own. These could be Saturn's moons Titan and Iapetus, Jupiter's satellite called Callisto, and our moon. Yes, our own moon could have its own tiny satellite. Why doesn't it? The researchers haven't found the answer to this question yet. The existence, or lack thereof, of moons may shed light on satellite formation and evolution in planetary systems. But once we find the answers we're looking for, the next logical question may arise. Can a moon have a moon of its own? If so, what name would be the most suitable for such a space body? A great grand moon? Write your variants in the comments. Besides hypothetical moons, there are loads of other bizarre things in the universe, the existence of which we haven't proven yet. Hypothetical nuclear pasta is one of them. If it does exist, nuclear pasta is the strongest material in the entire universe. It forms from the leftovers of extinguished stars when this substance gets squeezed into spaghetti-like tangles of material. It can theoretically break, but according to estimates, it could only happen if you applied 10 billion times the pressure you'd need to shatter steel. Then, there's dark matter and dark energy. We kinda know these things exist, but no one has seen them yet. Everything on Earth, and everything people can observe in space with the help of telescopes and other instruments is normal matter. It's made up of atoms and molecules and adds up to less than 5% of the universe. Almost 3/4 of the universe is dark energy. Astronomers wouldn't even know the thing existed if several decades ago they hadn't found out that the expansion of the universe wasn't slowing down. Quite the opposite. It was accelerating. It meant there had to be some enigmatic force that counteracted gravity. It was dubbed dark energy. As for about 27% of the remaining universe, it's believed that it's made up of dark matter. If dark energy is a force responsible for the expansion of the universe, dark matter is supposed to explain how objects work together. Potential candidates for dark matter vary from strange particles to super dim objects. But even though astronomers can't grasp what exactly dark matter is, they know for sure what it isn't. It's dark, which means we can rule out visible stars and planets. It also can't be dark clouds of normal matter, otherwise, scientists would be able to detect it. Dark matter is not antimatter. Astronomers don't see unique gamma rays that appear when antimatter comes in contact with matter, and neither is dark matter gigantic, galaxy-sized black holes.
There are a few theories about how the moon appeared in the sky, and recently a new idea has popped up. But before we discuss this newcomer, let's look at the most popular hypotheses of the moon's formation. The capture theory claims that Earth's natural satellite used to be a wandering body, something like a large asteroid. It had formed somewhere else in the solar system before it was captured by our planet's gravity when passing nearby. The accretion hypothesis suggests that the moon formed in orbit around Earth at the same time as our planet appeared in the darkness of the cosmos. Then, there's the fission theory that says that at one point in its development, Earth was spinning so fast that some of its material broke away and started to orbit the planet. And the giant impact theory, which is the most popular these days, claims that the moon formed during a collision between Earth and another hypothetical planet called Theia, which was way smaller, probably the size of Mars. The resulting debris collected in an orbit around Earth and formed the moon. And now, let's move to the new theory you've been patiently waiting for. According to it, our satellite might have formed immediately, in a matter of hours, after the collision between Earth and Theia. The material from the two planets was likely launched directly into Earth's orbit right after the impact. It formed the moon and left traces deep inside Earth. In previous scenarios, Theia's remains were thought to have been scattered all over space, mixing with just a bit of the material coming from our own planet. But then, why do we see such shocking similarities between the moon's and Earth's compositions? Could it be that Theia was isotonically and chemically similar to Earth? Unlikely. But according to the new theory, more material from Earth was used to create the moon, its outer layers in particular. It might explain this similarity in composition. One more theory also tries to explain this mysterious similarity, the synestia model. According to it, our satellite formed inside a swirl of vaporized rock left by the collision. But this theory can't explain the moon's current orbit. The new single-stage theory does offer us plausible explanations for both the similarities in composition and the orbit of the moon. It might also provide us with some answers to previously unsolved mysteries. Since this scenario puts the moon into a wider orbit and gives it an interior that is not fully molten, it can explain the satellite's tilted orbit and thin crust. In any case, to confirm one of these theories, we need to analyze future lunar samples that will be brought to Earth by NASA's upcoming Artemis missions. Scientists will be able to get their hands on some material from deeper beneath the moon's surface and compare if real data matches these simulated scenarios. In the past, the Apollo missions already brought back about 1/3 of a ton of rock and soil from our satellite. These samples showed that Earth and the moon had some remarkable chemical similarities. They could only suggest one thing. These space objects had a linked history. If the moon had formed elsewhere and been captured by our planet's gravity later on, its composition would be very different from that of Earth. But if the moon had been created at the same time as Earth, or if it had broken off our planet, the type and proportion of minerals on the moon would be the same as on Earth. But they are a bit different. The moon's minerals contain less water than their terrestrial counterparts. The satellite is also richer in materials that form rapidly at high temperatures. That's why the most accepted model of the moon's formation these days is the giant impact model. Meteorites coming from the moon are a great source of data for studying the origins of our satellite too. They can tell us even more about the moon than Apollo samples, all because such meteorites come from all over the surface of the moon. Meanwhile, Apollo samples were collected just in one place near the equator, on the near side of the moon. In the universe, wonders are never in short supply, and each one tells us a story about time, space, and our place among the stars. One such tale revolves around our closest celestial neighbor, the moon. This enigmatic satellite, accompanying Earth for billions of years, has captivated human attention throughout the ages. From the first shamans worshipping the moon to modern-day scientists probing its surface, it remains a key to understanding our past, present, and perhaps future. Here's the sun. It's in the center of our solar system. Mercury, Venus, and here's Earth and the moon. The Earth takes 365 days to orbit around the star. At the same time, the moon revolves around the Earth and completely orbits our planet in 27 days. The Earth creates a shadow zone, and sometimes the moon passes through it. The shadow is cone-shaped and gradually narrows. The moon is 238,000 miles away. That's like 9 lengths of the equator. At this distance, the width of the shadow is about 2.6 times the width of the moon. When the moon is in this zone, direct sunlight doesn't reach it. That is, it should have disappeared, but instead it becomes red. All because the sun's rays pass through the Earth's atmosphere. They scatter and most of the blue light disappears. But the red and orange rays continue and hit the surface of the moon. Voila! You see a phenomenon called the blood moon. By the way, this curvature of light occurs at sunsets and dawns. The atmosphere scatters the blue light, and you see a red and orange sky. If you were standing on the surface of the moon during a total lunar eclipse, planet Earth would be exactly between you and the sun, so you would be able to observe the solar eclipse. The surface of the Earth would become entirely dark for you. All you'd see would be the sun's corona illuminating the edges of the planet. The Earth from the surface of the moon is almost the same size as the moon from the surface of the Earth. Such a red eclipse of the moon is rare because several factors must coincide. One of them is that the moon must be full. Usually, you can see 2 total lunar eclipses a year. In 2038, you'll be able to see 4 such eclipses, and the eclipse itself can last up to 108 minutes. But this is rare, and the last time such a long blood moon was seen was in 2000. Many years ago, people didn't know so many facts about our satellite, and the sight of a red moon frightened them. It was a bad sign and a harbinger of trouble. People who knew the schedule of eclipses could take advantage of it. For example, Christopher Columbus had an astronomical almanac and knew when the next lunar eclipse would occur. He frightened the inhabitants of the Caribbean islands when he predicted the red moon. The moon is gravitationally locked with the Earth. That's why it is always turned to us with one side, like Mercury and the sun. But the moon doesn't stand still. It's gradually moving away from our planet. About 1.5 in a year. Not quickly, but in about 600 million years, it will have shrunk in our sky so much that we won't be able to see lunar eclipses anymore. Do you see this crater? It's Tycho. It's visible during a full moon because of these bright rays that extend thousands of miles from its epicenter. This is the youngest crater on the moon. Scientists say it appeared there due to a meteorite impact about 109 million years ago. At that time, dinosaurs were roaming the surface of our planet, and they may have seen the impact. It was most likely accompanied by a big explosion and looked like a salute in the night sky. In wrapping up, our relationship with the moon is a testament to the beauty and mystery of our universe. Its patterns, movements, and influence on Earth serve as a reminder of the grand cosmic dance we're a part of. If you're intrigued by such celestial wonders, do consider subscribing for more insights into our incredible universe.
Did you know that in 1958, 2 powerful rivals planned to take the lead in the space race by launching an atomic bomb at our natural satellite? What would have happened if they had gone through with it? Who the hell thinks bombing the moon is a good way to win a popularity contest? On top of that, we're going to find out if anyone ever did bomb outer space and why. Stick around, because what we're about to tell you sounds incredible. But it actually happened, and even Carl Sagan was involved. It's not like there weren't better ways to grab attention, but let's be honest, who wouldn't want to see some space fireworks? That was pretty much the thinking behind the US Air Force's secret project, A119. This top-secret initiative aimed to launch a nuclear bomb at the moon, hoping the explosion, with enough megatons, would be visible from Earth with the naked eye. To understand why such a wild idea could even seem reasonable at the time, we need to look at the context. In the 1950s and 60s, international tensions were sky high. The aftermath of World War II and the rise of 2 rival superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, led to the Cold War and the famous space race. That race brought incredible scientific advancements. Artificial satellites, robotic landers on the moon, Venus, and Mars, the first human orbital flight, and eventually, the first moon landing in human history. But not every project launched during the space race was a win. Some were total failures, or worse, absurd and dangerous ideas that cost governments tons of money just to prove who had the bigger rocket, so to speak. Project A119 also aimed to answer some questions in planetary astronomy and astrobiology. Like what, you might ask? Well, for example, what would happen if a nuclear bomb exploded on the moon? A very original study, you have to give them that. Despite its age, it remains one of the few declassified reports on the topic. And to make this case even more interesting, young Carl Sagan was part of the team. He was responsible for predicting the effects of a nuclear explosion in vacuum and low gravity. This bold idea, to detonate an H-bomb on the moon for everyone on Earth to see, seems to have been sparked by a rumor published in the Pittsburgh Press in 1957. The article claimed the Soviet Union was planning to celebrate the anniversary of the October Revolution with a big bang on the moon. The explosion would take place at the moon's terminator, the boundary between its lit and dark sides. Apparently, Project A119 also considered the terminator as a target. The article also mentioned that if the Soviet missile missed, it would fall back to Earth and disintegrate in orbit. But what it didn't mention were the even bigger consequences if it did hit the lunar surface. But wait, what could possibly go wrong? The moon's super far away, right? Well, a lot could go wrong. It depends on the bomb's yield, of course, but what if a 100 megaton bomb exploded on the moon's surface? That would trigger a series of very unfortunate events. Since the moon has no atmosphere to dampen the blast, there would be no shockwave like on Earth. With nothing to contain or slow it down, the explosion would just keep expanding monstrously. Terrifying, right? But that's not all. The moon would experience a massive quake that could shake the entire body. Though, to be fair, back in 1958, there were no lunar bases to destroy, so that wasn't a big concern yet. The impact would pulverize the lunar surface, launching dust and debris into space in all directions, including Earth's path. Many of these micrometeorites could rain down on our planet, causing damage. While the blast on the moon wouldn't go on forever, it would eventually cool and lose energy. The leftover radioactive material would slowly settle back onto the surface. And without natural processes like Earth's rain or erosion to clean it up, the radiation would stay there for a very long time. So, what eventually happened to the US's Project A119 and the Soviet Union's Project E? Well, what had to happen? Both were scrapped due to the extreme risks and the possible impact on future lunar colonization. Now, a question some of you, especially Star Wars fans, might be wondering is, were there no more plans to blow stuff up in space after that? And the answer is, oh yes, there were. It wasn't exactly a bomb, but in 2009, NASA deliberately set off the equivalent of about 2 tons of TNT with the LCROSS, Lunar Crater Observation and Sensing Satellite. The goal was to see if there was frozen water in the Cabeus crater on the dark side of the moon. They crashed the probe into the moon, and the mission was a total success. Yes, there's water on the moon. Also, during the Cold War, in 1962, the US launched Project Starfish, the largest nuclear detonation ever carried out in space. It was a high-altitude test that caused a massive electromagnetic pulse so strong that it messed up the very instruments meant to measure it. It even affected Hawaii, causing about 300 streetlights to go out, triggering burglar alarms and damaging phone lines. Now you know who and why someone wanted to nuke our dear satellite. But as it turns out, we couldn't change the moon's orbit or get a fireworks show that easily. The moon's too massive and the consequences are way too dangerous. But hey, it's all just a cold case now, right? There's no one still trying to prove who's bigger and stronger by nuking stuff. Right. Let us know in the comments if you already knew about this case, and until next time. The moon has always been a source of wonder, myth, and mystery. It lights up our nights, controls the tides, and marks the rhythms of time. But what if the moon isn't what it seems? What if this familiar, glowing orb in the sky is not a natural object at all, but a hollow, perhaps even artificial construct? That's the central idea behind the hollow moon theory, a concept that blends science fiction with ancient lore and dares to question everything we think we know about Earth's closest celestial neighbor. Let's explore the bizarre clues and strange stories that fuel this unsettling possibility. During the Apollo missions in the late 1960s and early 1970s, NASA astronauts left behind scientific instruments, including seismometers. In 1969, the Apollo 12 crew intentionally crashed a portion of their spacecraft onto the lunar surface. The result shocked mission control. The moon reverberated for over 50 minutes. Scientists said it rang like a bell. This was not a one-time event. Later impacts during Apollo 13 and 14 produced similar results, long-lasting, deep seismic vibrations that were unlike anything observed on Earth. Some theorists argue that this behavior could be a sign that the moon is hollow or has vast inner cavities. After all, nothing on Earth behaves that way unless it's mostly empty inside. NASA's explanation is more conservative. The moon has a dry, rigid crust with little water content, which allows seismic waves to travel much farther than they would through Earth's moist, fractured interior. Still, the Bell effect remains one of the strangest lunar anomalies on record. In many ancient cultures, there are legends of a time when there was no moon. Aristotle mentioned that the Pelasgians, the ancient people of Arcadia, lived before there was a moon in the heavens. The Zulu people of Africa tell stories of two brothers, Wawane and Mpanku, who brought the moon to Earth, an artificial object, hollow and controlled, which changed the weather and caused great floods. Ancient Sumerian texts also hint at a celestial object that arrived unexpectedly in the sky. These accounts span multiple continents and civilizations, alluding to a world that once turned without a moon. Are these myths simply poetic metaphors? Or could they be distant memories of real events passed down in the only language available to ancient humans, myth and story? The moon is the fifth largest natural satellite in the solar system, and by far the largest relative to the size of its planet. No other moon comes close in size ratio. This alone makes Earth's moon an outlier, but there's more. The moon is precisely the right distance from Earth, about 384,000 kilometers, to perfectly cover the sun during a total solar eclipse. The sun is 400 times larger than the moon, and also about 400 times farther away. This perfect 400 to 400 ratio creates an extraordinary visual phenomenon that allows scientists to study the sun's corona during eclipses. Coincidence? Maybe. But to some researchers, it feels more like design. And then there's the moon's orbit. It's almost perfectly circular, and it's tidally locked, meaning we always see the same face. We never see the far side of the moon from Earth, unless we send spacecraft around it. Why does this object behave so precisely? Is it a natural product of gravitational forces, or something else? In 1970, Soviet scientists Mikhail Vasin and Alexander Sherbakov published a radical paper titled, "Is the Moon the Creation of Alien Intelligence?" They suggested that the moon may be a colossal, ancient spaceship, an alien construct disguised as a natural satellite. According to their hypothesis, the moon might have a metallic outer shell with an inner structure that once supported machinery, life, or monitoring equipment. They compared it to a planet-sized arc that could travel between star systems. While their paper was largely dismissed in the West, it planted the seed for countless other theories. Could the moon be a derelict alien spacecraft, long abandoned perhaps watching us still. More recent fringe thinkers have proposed even stranger ideas. Some argue that the moon might not just be a passive structure, but a kind of anchor for a simulated or controlled reality. In this vision, the moon is not just hollow, but alive with technology, possibly operating as a monitoring station, memory regulator, or even a civilization reset button. Ancient floods, magnetic pole shifts, and unexplained disasters. Some theorists claim these events correlate with specific lunar alignments or cycles. Others go further, suggesting that the moon is part of a larger system designed to keep human consciousness limited, trapped in cycles of forgetting and rediscovery. Is the moon helping to shape our very perception of time, reality, and evolution? It's impossible to prove, and perhaps that's the point. Even beyond the big theories, there are many small puzzles that don't quite fit. For example, when scientists first studied moon rocks, they expected to find thick layers of accumulated dust, possibly several meters deep. Instead, the moon's surface dust was surprisingly shallow. Where did all the debris go? Radio signals sent to the moon sometimes bounce back with strange delays, suggesting interior reflections that aren't typical for solid rock. And then there are the mysterious transient lunar phenomena. Sudden flashes, glows, or color changes on the moon's surface. These have been observed by astronomers for centuries, yet remain unexplained. Mainstream science sees the moon as the product of a massive collision in Earth's early history, a fragment of the young planet that cooled into orbit. But for every answer science provides, there seem to be more questions. Why does this object behave so perfectly? Why do myths around the world speak of its arrival? And why does its presence feel so scripted? Whether you believe in the hollow moon theory or not, one thing is certain: the moon is far more than just a rock in the sky. It is a mirror to our imagination, a beacon to our ancestors, and maybe, just maybe, a puzzle we were never meant to solve.
NASA has some incredible plans for the moon. For example, their next ambitious lunar program, Artemis 2. They've set their sights on landing astronauts, including the first woman and the next man, on the moon by 2024. Artemis is all about building a sustainable presence on the moon. They're planning to establish a lunar gateway, a sort of space station in lunar orbit, which will serve as a jumping-off point for lunar landings. And let's not forget about the cool lunar landers. Scientists are developing the mighty Space Launch System rocket, which will launch the Orion spacecraft carrying astronauts towards the moon. Then there's the Human Landing System, a snazzy lunar lander that will gently touch down on the moon's surface, allowing astronauts to explore and conduct amazing scientific experiments. And NASA isn't going alone this time. They're teaming up with international partners, like the European Space Agency, to make this lunar dream a reality. But all these wonderful dreams might be ruined by something that seems super small and insignificant at first. Picture this: no atmosphere, no air to breathe, and suddenly, a mysterious haze and radiant beams of light appear at sunrise and sunset. It's as if the moon is putting on a celestial show. But there is a twist to this beauty. During the Apollo 17 mission in 1972, this beautiful sight made one of the NASA astronauts, Harrison Schmitt, sneeze and made his eyes water. He called it lunar hay fever. This mysterious fever affected all 12 moonwalkers. From sneezing fits to stuffy noses, those astronauts experienced symptoms as if they caught a cold. It took days for the reactions to fade away. This event led to a discovery about lunar dust and its darker side. When scientists found out about these rays, they rolled up their sleeves and delved into their origins. And here's what they discovered. Those radiant bands of light were actually caused by sunlight sneaking through layers of teeny-tiny lunar dust. The dust was composed of small particles and sharp glass shards, and was lurking everywhere. And it turned out that this lunar dust was a sneaky villain. It brought a whole host of problems. Astronauts who found themselves with impaired vision were just the beginning. The troublemaker went even further, damaging precious machinery and causing electronic malfunctions. It even had the audacity to corrode components and smelled like burnt gunpowder inside the spacecraft. Yikes. It clings to everything, coating surfaces like a mischievous blanket. It can clog up equipment, get into delicate machinery, and even mess with astronauts' spacesuits. In 1972, things got really hairy again. The Apollo 17 astronauts faced a nightmare. After just 22 hours of gallivanting on the lunar surface, their spacesuits suffered irreparable damage. Yes, you heard that right. Irreparable. The dust diminished astronauts' mobility, making it harder for them to move around and perform their moonwalks with grace. And no matter how hard they tried to clean it off, it clung on for dear life, leaving the spacesuits in a sorry state. So, as you can see, it poses some serious challenges for future moon missions. But our intrepid scientists aren't giving up. To solve this problem, they have to understand how lunar dust forms and why it's so darn clingy. They found out that it all begins with meteorite impacts. When these space rocks crash into the moon, they generate a fine dust that fills the air. Sometimes these impacts even cause minerals to melt, forming sharp glass shards that mix with the dust. Talk about a moon makeover. The dust is also filled with silicate, a material commonly found on volcanic planets. Silicate inhalation can cause serious lung problems for Earth's miners, so you can imagine the trouble it can cause on the moon. A recent study found that even a scoop of replica moon dust was toxic enough to destroy up to 90% of lung and brain cells exposed to it. But it gets worse. The low gravity on the moon allows those tiny particles to float around for much longer, penetrating deeper into the lungs. Imagine breathing particles 50 times smaller than a human hair for months. That's a recipe for trouble. And you see, on the moon's surface, things are a bit different than here. There are no rainstorms or strong gusts of wind to blow this dust away. There is also no atmosphere to protect the surface. So without the natural forces of wind and water erosion like we have on Earth, these dry particles stick around persistently. And to make matters more electrifying, the moon is constantly showered by radiation from the sun. This exposure gives the dust an electric charge. The solar winds create positively and negatively charged particles. The particles then buzz around, repelling each other and giving rise to those radiant bands of light that the Apollo 8 astronauts witnessed. It's like a disco party on the moon. ESA, the European Space Agency, has gathered a team of experts to study the lunar dust. They're working with simulated moon dust mined from a volcanic region in Germany to understand its behavior and effects. Engineers also need to find a way to protect future astronauts and equipment. Engineers in NASA want to create spacesuits that can survive not 1, not 10, but a whopping 100 extravehicular activities on the lunar surface. That's like spending 800 hours out there, exploring and having a blast. Besides that, NASA initiated the Breakthrough, Innovative, and Game-Changing Idea Challenge in 2021. It was open to clever university students from all over the world. These young minds put their thinking caps on and unleashed a wave of innovative solutions. For example, they proposed using special fibers that conduct electricity, inspired by fluffy chinchilla hair. Just like how chinchillas stay dust-free, these fibers would help keep the lunar dust at bay. A furry friend lending a helping paw, isn't that adorable? Another bright idea involved an electrically charged brush activated by UV radiation. It's like a magical wand that zaps away the dust with a flick. Abracadabra, lunar dust be gone. And let's not forget the fabric inspired by clever insects. These insects have pollen-collecting structures that repel unwanted dust. So our ingenious students thought, why not mimic that? They designed a fabric with similar properties, creating a shield against the sneaky lunar particles. What's remarkable about these ideas is that they all use the power of charge to fight the dust. They cleverly repel it from the spacesuits, keeping them clean and protected. And even though all these ideas sound pretty great, scientists in NASA unleashed another, even better solution: carbon nanotubes. It's a great way to revolutionize spacesuit fabric. What makes these carbon nanotubes so special? Well, they possess some amazing superpowers. First off, they're superconductive, meaning they can carry electricity like nobody's business. It's like having a lightning bolt trapped inside a microscopic tube. Not only that, But these carbon nanotubes are tougher than the toughest meteors. They have the strength to withstand the harsh lunar environment, where even a speck of dust can cause trouble. Imagine having a suit made of a material that's stronger than Superman's cape. So, NASA's scientists decided to weave these extraordinary carbon nanotubes into the spacesuit fabric. The electrodes were carefully integrated into the outer layer of the fabric, making it a force to be reckoned with. But how do they banish the lunar dust? Well, here comes electrifying science again. When activated by a special alternating current, the electrodes create powerful electric fields. These fields work like magnets, repelling both charged and uncharged dust particles away from the spacesuit. Picture this like a dance party, where the dust particles are the uninvited guests, and the electric fields are the bouncers, swiftly escorting them out. Thanks to this technology, lunar dust doesn't stand a chance against our astronauts. Also on the bright side, the lunar soil can be used to make bricks for shelters. It can also help extract oxygen for astronauts to survive on the moon for long periods of time. When life gives you lemons, make a lemonade, right? So, let's cheer on our NASA Dream Team as they embark on this epic lunar quest. Let's hope that they succeed in their findings, and the next moon mission won't be a big problem. Stay tuned.